And we're back with Survivor 42 and 42. I just finished wrapping up Survivor Guatemala. Their union's playing. Danny Boatwright just won, all that jazz. I'm joined by John, who, much like McKenna from yesterday, is part of the Dynamic Character Productions, which the link will be in the description. Please apply to their games. They run an amazing online Survivor game, both long form and minis. They actually have a season coming out right now. Episode 3 just came out last night. 4. Survivor Guatemala. I wrote in the description, it's the forgotten season. I think Survivor has done its best to try to bury this season until 40. What were your initial thoughts on the season, and have they changed with any rewatches afterwards?
This is probably one of the seasons I've watched the most now of all seasons, because I keep going back to it to figure out what this season is about. Because it feels like that season that's just kind of forgotten in time. It's our first season with returning and new players. So, that's kind of iconic. But aside from that, it kind of just sits in this very strange place between, real old school Survivor, where they're focusing on, the survival aspects, and starting to inch towards a more new school Survivor, where they're introducing more twists to the gameplay. It's just such a weird season that doesn't really offer much of anything special.
I would say that I agree with that. It's just a bunch of... I don't even think there's, a cohesive storyline. They have the main characters, but, there's never... I'll say it like this. The first time I watched the season, I hated Jamie and Judd. Every other time since then, especially this one, I found them, like the villains that you love to hate. Meanwhile, I just didn't like Stephanie this season, just because. But I feel like Judd and Jamie played their roles really, really well. I feel like the early on of the Bobby John Jamie rivalry was amazing. I feel like Jamie wasn't being fake when he gave up his food reward. I feel like he did really, feel bad for the way he had acted the night before. But I feel like especially towards the end game, we don't get a lot of Danny content, which I feel like that's not the case with, that's the case with a lot of winners. That's not the case with a lot of winners. Whatever I'm trying to say. I feel like towards the end of the game, we start getting more content from a certain player, especially if they're going to win. And I'm pretty sure in the penultimate or third to last episode, we almost didn't get anything from Danny, which I found really strange. And this might be, a case of, Russell Hanson, Natalie White thing where it's like why Stephanie lost. But even then, a lot of the jurors came off. I understood why, Judd was, I guess. He lied to his wife. But a lot of the jurors came off as overly pissed off at her. And I didn't really feel like she did anything overly malicious. So what did you think of Stephanie's game? And do you think it was warranted the way she was not attacked, but, questioned at Final Tribal?
The real awkward thing I find about Guatemala is that it's kind of I feel the season's kind of defined by testosterone and entitlement. And that's where I find Stephanie really falls. She falls really hard into the entitlement category with this, where she's coming off Palau, where she was kind of like America's sweetheart because she was this underdog. Everyone was rooting for her. But she goes into Guatemala knowing that. She knows everyone loves her, and she feels she can just act however she wants, and everyone's going to continue loving her. And while I do think a lot of these comments at Final Tribal seem really out of place, she's playing the game. Okay, she lied to you, but even with Stephanie's rebuttal to Judd, where Judd's saying she lied to his wife, she says, I didn't lie at that time. Things changed, because that's what happens in the game. Was her way of saying that very tactful? No, she got very aggressive and defensive at that time. But she was just playing the game. And I do feel that a lot of these people were kind of just butthurt over the fact that she decided to maneuver herself in a way that actually ended up getting her to the end.
Their queen turned on them. And I think that's what I don't remember who it was. I think it was pre-merge. I don't remember who said it, but you can get her autograph afterwards. And I feel like everyone that won a reward challenge at the merge, I'm fairly certain brought Stephanie along. And I think in that same episode, she would vote them out. And it's like, yes, you're hurting all these people, but also you've been warned. You also understand that, she is America's sweetheart and, this, that, and the other. And you do see the way she's playing the game. And whether you like it or not, you see that she's playing the game better than almost everyone except for probably Rafe and Danny. And so if you sit there and you're saying, you lied and you did all this, once again, I always go back to the Sheehan thing from All Stars where it's like, yeah, pot kettle, glass houses, all of that, because you are all lying here. Sorry, no one gets to the end without telling a lie at some point because you have to vote out people every round. And I'm pretty sure you're not telling, unless you're Jamie, you're not telling people that you're voting them out. And this is one of the last seasons where you actually see that happen, where you see people telling people they're going to vote them out. I know that Panama has Lamina tribe, where they tell, but here, because the idol is introduced, I want to actually get right into the idol, I guess. Because the idol is introduced, and this is the baby form of it, I think that this is one of those last seasons where people feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'm probably going to, it's probably going to be you tonight, and, it's no big deal. And I'm glad that that's not really the case anymore, because usually that is, they usually do just vote that person out, or at least vote for that person. What did you think of the OG idol?
In concept, in its raw concept form, the idol makes sense. It's not as dramatic in its format in this, where you play it before the votes. It's not quite as impactful. And I feel like the editing in the episode where it gets played is really poor, because you don't really know Gary's the one getting the votes.
Yeah.
You get the tribal council.
It's him or Bobby John.
Yeah, it's okay, but are they just voting out Bobby John anyways? And then eventually you find out, no, this is it. But there was no tension built up in the episode to make you think this idol play is such a fantastic play. I even found myself thinking while watching the episode, it's does Gary even need to play it here? Does he misplay the idol because he could have kept it a little later? And I was trying to remember the rules, and then Jeff does say at that tribal council that if they want to play it this tribal council, they can. But it's just so weird. It feels weird. Survivor messed around with the idol a lot. I feel that this iteration is still kind of better than the super idol iteration we get for the next couple of seasons. But it's a game-changing moment, and that's why Guatemala can't be forgotten.
Yeah, and that's the wild thing about, and going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the two big things about this are, one, like you said, it's the first season with a returnee versus newbie season, but it's also the first season that introduces an idol. And you would think just based off of those two, at some point or another, they would reference this season. When in reality, even on Heroes versus Villains, they don't reference the fact that Stephanie played on the season. It's just oh yeah, in Palau it was this, and the tribal council where Stephanie eventually goes home, James is yeah, she's known for losing, and that's all she does is lose. It's well, that's not true. She's on the winning tribe in Guatemala and finishes in second place. And I'm going to assume that at some point during that tribal, James probably references Guatemala, but it's just one of these weird seasons where there was nothing in here that I feel warranted being buried. We've had people from Thailand come back. We're probably going to have people from Island of the Idols come back. And, those seasons are those seasons. So the fact that, until 40, people just didn't care about Guatemala is confusing, because I do feel even a lot of the characters that we get this season, people like Judd, people like Jamie, even people like Rafe or Cindy or Lydia, who we'll get to in a second, I feel a lot of people in this season were more strategic than I remembered the first time I watched it. Everyone had, what everyone's game plan is based off what they're telling you, except for Danny, based off confessionals and how they interact with people. But I know that you want to speak a piece on Lydia. I have my own opinions as well, but what were your thoughts on Lydia?
Lydia's one of those fantastic archetypes. It's this archetype that Survivor filled for a very long time of the older woman, and Lydia completely embraces it in the best way by just being this like kooky character. It's so weird. Lydia feels really out of place on this cast because this cast is like not diverse at all.
It is not.
It is
It's
not.
the least
It has Lydia.
diverse cast probably ever.
But Lydia just plays into it really well. She's so fun. There's that scene in the pre-merge after the swap where she's just like dancing up a storm, and she's just such a good character. And she's also gets this like underdog story of she's like this early target because she's really weak, but then you get to the merge and it's better to keep the weaker people in because you can beat them. And she just keeps going, and she just has such a fantastic energy to her. Even I think like the thing that really shows how fantastic Lydia is as a Survivor player is in Final Tribal Council, just how calm she is while discussing with Stephanie and Danny. Like everyone else is getting heated. Lydia is just this picture of calmness and zen, just asking questions and like respecting the answers she's getting and not rebutting them or anything and just taking them for what they are. Lydia just approached this knowing it was a game. She understands the game. We see that in her confessionals. And she also made herself a character to know that she'll get screen time. It's kind of like your perfect mid-season Survivor character.
Yeah, and I would compare her like who are some characters we have coming up? Not in the same way, but almost like Shane. Where like Shane is Shane. Strategically, like he at least knows what's going on within a vacuum. And he's the type of player that people want to see on TV. And I think I do think he was going through withdrawal and all that stuff, but I do think he was also playing up a lot of this stuff because, hey, more screen time if Bruce is being evacuated and I'm butt naked on TV. Like, it's just how it's going to be. And like I said, I'm not comparing Lydia directly to Shane, but I would say that's because I have Panama starting in a little bit. That's why I have that in my head. But this time watching Lydia, it was almost like watching her confessionals and watching her interact with people are two totally different people. And, when she's talking to people, she's this goofy Lydia. She doesn't know what's going on. When right after they vote out Jamie and Judd is watching her talk to Gary and Lydia's sitting there like this, like Google-eyed, like she does, like she's, oh, I'm dumb. I don't know anything. And then she immediately goes to confessional and says, yeah, this could be a route here. And then I think after Gary goes is where she sits with Judd and basically tries to get Judd to say, hey, I might want to get rid of Stephanie. It's like but people just read it as, tell me what to do. I'm just a number. When in reality, she's trying to lead these things, but it's just that these people's egos, like you mentioned earlier, in their heads, they're the ones that are doing this. It can't be little old Lydia. And I've always, especially after this time, I wonder what would have happened if she had sat at Final Tribal and like taken the costume off and shown Lydia the strategist how people might have perceived her just based off of what we saw the jury do here.
Yeah, especially when you consider just like the fact that Danny even says it in her argument at Final Four, right? Lydia sits at the end, she wins. And that's with them thinking she's the goofy person. What happens when she just proves she's the better player too?
Yeah. And once again, Jeff, the antagonizer. I thought you guys said that you wanted to bring the weak person, but the weak person's on the jury. And it's like, well, thanks, Jeff. But also, I do think that in that case, they probably still should have. I think it was the best chance by voting out Lydia, because I do think Lydia could have probably beaten all three of them, or two of the three of them. But and they're talking about the Gary Hawkins thing right now, so I want to get to that in a second. I do and did enjoy Lydia a lot more this season. I think she's a very, very underrated character because she, like you said, she basically started the crazy person archetype that, has, eventually evolved to the coaches and the Phillips and everything of the world, where they become more of a cartoon character than what Lydia was, which is Lydia's a cartoon character here, but in front of the camera, this is what's actually going on. As compared to Coach, where it's like cartoon character here, cartoon character when I'm on exile, I'm just eating it with the screen time. Gary Hawkins, or Hogaboom, but Hawkins. They're showing his highlights right now. Do you think he did the right thing by just saying, I'm a construction worker, or landscaping. I'm a landscaper. Or do you think that he should have gone in like Cliff Robinson and said, yeah, you know what? I was a former professional football player in his case.
I think he took exactly the strategy he was supposed to, because I do think we've seen it with professional athletes on the show over and over again. They can get far in the game. They can get deep in the game. But once you get towards that end, it's a question of, are they deserving of $1 million? It's like, well, he's already a professional athlete. Does he need $1 million? I do think keeping his identity secret was a good idea. It kind of sucks. There was a sportscaster of all things on this season with him.
They did that on purpose. They did it
absolutely.
Yeah, there's no way that they didn't figure out that Danny was absolutely going to immediately clock that this guy was Gary Hogaboom. Especially they're from the same area.
Yeah. There's no way. And Gary had been retired for 15 years at the time.
Yeah, something aired. Like that. Yeah.
So it had been a while. He probably was talking to production during the casting process, being like, yeah, I'm just going to pretend I'm some landscaper. And they're like, okay, perfect. Well, we have a sportscaster who can call you out on it then.
And, because I think that Danny, I don't think Danny bought Gary's story. Oh, no, she didn't, because she gets a professional. She's like, the fact that, at least from what we see, she never outs him, I think that shows that she really was willing to work with him. And I was almost surprised that, one, he didn't mention it at Final Tribal, but two, that his family didn't slip up in their video and say something incriminating, much like Brian in Thailand. That's my Thailand reference for this episode. But Gary, one of the first professional athletes that we had on, and up until recently, the highest placing professional athlete, I'm fairly certain. Because Danny got 6 in 40. Okay. And Gary, he's one of these old school players who are like, oh, what do they do around camp? If they're lazy, I don't really want them around, blah, blah, blah. But I think it works, like you said, in this season where this is still the transition period between old school and what is eventually going to become new school. But a lot of the gameplay in this season is very fluid, which is something that has just started to happen in the show. We had Vanuatu where the game was, kind of Palau, not so much. But once again, we're being introduced to a person on the bottom. And yes, a couple of her allies go. But from there, it becomes voting blocks of who we're going to get next. And, sadly, we don't see that again until Fiji. I'm fairly certain, because Panama is like a backwards pagonging because Terry can't lose. Cook Islands is I-2-4 pagonging everyone else. And yeah, I think Fiji's the next time that we see voting blocks and, more fluid gameplay. And I'm looking forward to getting to that point, mainly because I know that the next 2 seasons, although good, will kind of drag, knowing that there's no way that anybody's going to get out of the situation that they're in. I'm also looking forward to Candace going to Exile Island every single time, but we'll save that for Sunday, Monday. Pre-merge. I think this is where I almost checked out on the season, similar to Vanuatu. Vanuatu had a bunch of generic white guys in their pre-merge. And I feel like what this season is a lot of very generic white women pre-merge. I just finished, and I cannot name a single young white female from pre-merge, because I can name Margaret because they just showed her name on TV, and I can name Amy because she's going to kill Gary for lying to her. But the other 2 or 3, who were the women pre-merge?
Okay, so there's Morgan, who is the second person out of the season, who doesn't get a confessional in her exit episode, by the way. She's the magician assistant.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes.
And then there's Brianna.
She has black hair.
Yeah, that's about all I know about Brianna. Okay. And then there's Brooke.
Who's not male Brooke from Vanuatu, who is also very generic. All right.
Yes.
This is why we have John. But yeah, I think that the pre-merge it doesn't drag. It's just that the characters, you don't care about them. Like the ones you know who you're supposed to care about pre-merge.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of seasons they try to mess with you to see, oh yeah, you might want to care about this person. You might want to. They don't even try to say, hey, care about this magician's assistant, because like you just said, she doesn't even get in confessional in the episode she's booted. And I think that's maybe why the people don't think so highly on the season. I don't think it's like a top tier or even, almost top. I do think it's middle of the road, but once again, I just don't understand why they've chosen the Guatemala hill to die on as far as we're never referencing this season. Is there anything that happened this season, in your opinion, is there anything that happened this season where it's like, I can see how that is? Even if they don't like the winner, they haven't liked the winner of other seasons and have had more people come back.
I wonder if it has to do with Stephanie's about face from her Palau arc to this arc, and the fact that they're like, oh, we made a mistake bringing this person back. And they just don't want that reference a lot. It's tough because, I don't know. Like, there's nothing egregious other than the fact that, like, this is a season where they probably pushed the castaways way too hard and could have actually killed someone. And maybe that's just what it comes down to. Maybe they're just like, oh, this is the time where we weren't willing to medevac people, despite the fact
we're
that
going to let Bobby
had,
John just die because it makes good television.
Everyone has festering legions on their bodies. That's fine, right?
These, as you say that, they're showing the lesions on everyone's body. Yeah. So, and when I talked to McKenna about Palau, it started making me think, going into Guatemala, why they did do what they did with Stephanie. And, she raised a good point saying in Palau, she probably did have a lot of negative content that they cut out because she's supposed to be the hero of the season. But as we see here, I feel like we get more of what Stephanie really is. And then Heroes versus Villains happens, and it's like they wipe out what Guatemala is. And I'm gonna be a huge nerd for a second and make a comparison almost to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where Force Awakens happens, Last Jedi happens, and I like Last Jedi, but Rise of Skywalker comes, and it's like, nope, Last Jedi pretty much never happened. So the everything that happened here, Luke throwing the lightsaber, and then the third one's like, you should never throw a lightsaber. It's like, yeah, but you did, and that's the only comparison I could make in the situation where it's. I understand that she has to be your hero in Palau. I get that. In Guatemala, I think they could have still given her more positive content than they did. Maybe because she was going to eventually lose, they decided not to. But then don't try to play it up in Heroes vs. Villains as if you're a hardcore fan like we are, we're going to know that Guatemala happened. It's not going to be the casuals sitting there like, oh, I remember her from Palau. It's going to be like, no, I remember her from both times, and she's batting 500 right now. Do you think that Stephanie could have potentially swayed a few more voters her way, or do you think that it was game over walking in?
Based on that jury, I mean, that's why Danny takes Stephanie here, right? Because she knows that these people are already just going to be bitter at her and not vote for her. So she's just taking the guaranteed votes, where Rafe was someone who was likable, despite the fact that kind of seeing, like, I mean, he's even referred to as Stephanie's lackey at one point in the season.
For immunity, I think it was just, I did not remember that Rafe won for
No, he was an immunity beast, and it's because of that, like, pre-merge immunity that he wins that he gets to 4. But like, Rafe was really good at these challenges. I don't know. Like, the problem is like, I don't think we really got enough content in the episodes themselves to show why these people were so upset with Stephanie.
Yes.
And like Stephanie's arc throughout the season itself, kind of just like, hey, remember Stephanie from Palau? Yeah, she's bad now. Wouldn't it have been much greater to see her kind of like gradually fall into villainy this season and like emerge as this big villain at the end and justifiably have these people saying that she was doing these things against them? Like, I don't know. This season felt you mentioned it earlier that the season doesn't really feel like it has a through line. It just kind of feels that whoever was editing the season together just didn't storyboard it to figure out what is the major plot of this season. And they kind of just like threw things at the screen and hoped they would land.
Yes, that is exact. Because even next season, the season following this, and where I'm assuming they have the same editing team, there is a very simple storyline, and it's these crazy people versus Terry. Who's going to win? And then after that, we have the I-24 versus the white folk. And then after that, we have Earl and Yowman, versus the Four Horsemen. It's like, and right before this, we have Tom and his folks versus Oolong. But it's just weird why I don't know why they couldn't. And in the rumor and innuendo with Danny and like her hiding stuff from confessionals, that could be it. Maybe they wanted to make this about Danny, and then they realized they didn't have any content about her talking about the game because of what allegedly she was doing. Excuse me. But if that's the case, I get it. If it's anything else, I don't get it. But overall, Guatemala, do you on a rewatch? Is it? Yeah, I saw you do this, but is it this still like not?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it falls in my bottom 10, and it's just like, yeah, I just really don't like this season. I find this, and it's not because it's a bad season; it's because it's a boring season.
This or Redemption Island?
Oh, Redemption Island is way worse.
Okay, all right. I'm trying to think of other boring seasons that I could put it compare it to. But
those are the boring ones tend to be the ones that end up lower in my rankings. So like, I mean, Redemption Island is literally last in my rankings. So it was an easy comparison there. But
sorry.
And
Nicaragua.
I have Nicaragua higher than this.
Wow. Okay. Hot takes. No, Nicaragua is actually a season that I am looking forward to doing a rewatch for, because I know it gets a lot of hate, and I know that Fabio gets a lot of hate, and I know the double quit does take a lot of it out, and I know we're jumping ahead 2 weeks, but I am really excited to rewatch that one just to see if my mind changes on it, because with Guatemala, my mind really hasn't changed. I've always had it middle of the road, and it didn't change this time. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5, which is the exact same thing I gave it to Palau. The only difference is Palau's dropped. Guatemala has been 3.5 for me since when I did 40 and 40 2 years ago. It's just my favorite character on the season is Cindy, which Cindy's great and all, but like,
I mean,
what do we know about Cindy? Yeah,
but she's also put in one of the absolute worst situations in all of Survivor history.
Yes.
Like,
everyone talks about the Fuji car reward, but like this,
it's the worst one by far, because no matter what she does here, she loses the game.
Yes, because if she gives the cars away, all they have to do is say, "Oh, she's too nice. She has to go now." And instead, she could have also shut the fuck up when she got back to camp about.
Yeah, I mean, the car. She definitely made mistakes.
Yeah, and I do think that Danny played her role well in saying, "Oh, I would have." And Stephanie, give Stephanie credit, she's saying, really, you guys would have given the cars away? I feel like she made the right decision here. I think that once again, that is something that happens this season that, although not groundbreaking, it laid the groundwork for what we eventually get in 14.
Yeah.
Which everyone holds as the worst car reward, when in reality, this one really screwed Cindy. That really didn't screw Dreams, because Dreams was probably never winning, but also he still made it farther after the car reward than Cindy did. Overall, it was a fun rewatch. It didn't drag like Palau did, but I'm really, they're doing the preview for Panama right now, and the birth of the legend that is Suri. But also a lot of other fun characters that mostly we don't see again. Mostly Shane and Bruce. But we have Aris, we have Terry, we have the captain of sports herself. So I'm really looking forward to Panama. John, thank you so much. If you want to quickly chill, all the things John's pretty big on the online Survivor community, if you didn't know. So speak freely.
Yeah, so if you want to check out the different orgs that I'm a part of helping create, check out Dynamic Character Productions. We currently are airing our 5th mini Trinity Falls right now on our YouTube channel. We have new content dropping 5 days a week with episodes Mondays and Thursdays, exit interviews Wednesdays and Saturdays, and the weekly recaps on Sundays. Then I'm also a member of the Survivor Specialists, where Phil and I podcast about our top 100 movies every week as the movie buff specialist, and I'm also part of that producing a lot of content for the Patreon over there too. But
right.
Thank you very much for having me on today, Drew.
Thank you. And then I think we're having John back. I should always have this in front of me, but I never do. John, when is the next time we're having you back?
Cagayan.
All right. So we're going to get an actual good season. So we'll see John in about 3 weeks for Cagayan. Thank you, everyone, once again for tuning in. Thank you for continuing to reach out. You guys, I really appreciate the support. Make sure to follow John on all the links that I post. And we'll see y'all after Panama for Exile Island.